How's it going? I'm Andrew with Investors Hub, and we're chatting with Clem Chambers on Thursday today because he was busy yesterday, so no Clem's Day Wednesday. And we're going to be chatting about the recent CPI data that came out. We came in at expected inflation, but inflation is still like 5.4% year over year, which is well above the 2% average that we've been maintaining over the past couple of decades. They said this inflation is transitory, but like pretty much nobody believes them. Then we're also going to chat a little bit about the quantitative tapering and how that could affect the market. So yeah, if you like the video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter at ihub_vision. And after a quick disclaimer, we'll hear from Clem. Please note that our videos are not designed to be direct investing advice. Our channel and our content should just be one stop on the journey of trying to find out where to put your money. So, Clem, we learned that the CPI data came in a little bit above average, or what they expected, but it's still pretty hot. It was like 5.4% year over year. And they keep insisting that this inflation is transitory. So what do you think sort of the next steps that we're going to see taken by the government in order to start quantitative tapering? I know that they've mentioned that they're going to start slowing asset purchases starting pretty soon.
Well, that is the so-called tapering. But remember, to taper means to slim down. It doesn't mean to stop or reverse. So they're going to slow down the speed at which they're printing new money. Oh, sorry, they're not actually doing that really. No, of course not. No, they're not printing real money. No. But actually they are. QE doesn't have to be printing money. But when they basically print bonds and then buy them back for cash, you print bonds, you give it to a bank who gives you an asset, and then you go out and you buy those bonds back for cash. You are pushing cash into that bank. And there's a lot of that going on because fundamentally there's a real problem with the American economy, apart from the fact it's been whacked around the head with a mallet because of COVID, is that taxes don't meet expenditures by a long margin. And at some point, people stop buying American debt, and the only person to buy it is the Fed. And that's what's been going on and off for quite some time now. So if you look at the deficit of the US fiscal budget at the moment, which is $1 trillion plus, well, if foreigners don't show up and buy it, you're going to have to monetize that, and the Fed monetizes it. So basically, the buyer of it is the Fed, and the Fed pushes onto it cash, or around the house's way of pushing cash. So it gets around what is actually technically illegal to do, which is print money in America, and does it anyway. So if the Fed is buying Treasury debt, the Fed has to pay with money, and the money then goes out to the rest of the world or the budget of the American government, and that's running at about $1 trillion and a bit now. So if you actually look at what's going on, you're going to end up with the Fed printing approximately what the American fiscal deficit is, and that is inflationary. So to the day they can get out of this tailspin one way or the other, because I do think the thing to remember is politicians do not tax the country, or any country for that matter, to the limit where they can pay for what they do. They do it the other way around. They tax to the limit of what is bearable by their citizens, and then they spend it, and then they spend more, right? So there's no government that says, oh, our budget is X, so we're going to tax you X. Yeah, they go, our budget is as big as we can get it, and we're going to tax you as much as we possibly can, and then we're going to borrow the rest. Yeah, so they just tax as much as possible and then spend as much as they can. And that's why you get into these spirals of debt, because they don't actually have a budget to stay within means. They have a budget of needs, and then they go out and get the money, and then they borrow what they can't get. And that ends up in a situation where the only way you can afford to do that is to print money, and that's inflationary. So if you go to a country like, Turkey, good example, they really don't have a great method of taxation, and therefore they're always in a situation where it's hard for them to borrow it, so they just print it. And as they just print it, they get inflation. And same in South America. All those countries which you see with really high levels of inflation, it's because they can't tax it. They just spend it and print it. And the more dodgy, the more kleptocratic, the less in control a country is, the more it tends to just print the money and hand it out to whoever needs it for whatever their purposes are. And that's why you have high inflation in these places. And America's got in that position. The UK's in that position, and various other places are in that position, that they're having just to print the money, and therefore the inflation is baked in, because it's going to take many years for the economies of the West to get back to a stage where their budgets are balanced with their GDP, because they've dug a big hole 15-20%, and they've got to fill that in with growth, and that growth ain't going to come that quick.
So, sorry. So one of the circumstances that we're in right now, right, is the reverse repo situation, whereby the banks are giving cash to the Fed to hold for a very low interest rate because they don't really have any other place to put the money, or at the very least that the interest rate that the bank is offering, they did the math and it's worth it.
Or you could put it another way: is the Fed has pushed so much cash onto the system that the system is pushing it back onto it, because it can't use the cash. Yeah,
absolutely. All that stimulus money ended up in the hands of the banks, and the banks are like, we don't want to spend this because there's nowhere to put it. So hold on to this.
Not all of it. Only $1 trillion of it, too much.
just a casual trillion. And the other thing is that the Fed currently has their thumb on the scale for the bond market, because they're buying up all these bonds in order to make these transactions, I believe. I'm not 100% on it. But they are buying up these treasury securities, which is lowering the yields, which is propping up the stock market.
Well, it's something like that. The way that it goes is that in order to keep interest rates low, they have to be the buyer. So they're buying them all up. And that's what QE is. They buy bonds up, and they either hand out cash, which indirectly they hand out cash, or they hand out better quality debt for the debt they're taking on. Or they take long-term debt and replace it with short-term debt, or vice versa, depending on which way they want to push the bond curve. But basically, they control interest rates, full stop. It's not just a thumb. They're sat on the scale. The interest rate market and the bond market is rigged, is cornered, is a better way of putting it, by the Fed.
You pointed out in an earlier video that they always like to make the argument that, oh, there's not inflation fears because the bond yield curve is low. And I was like, well, no, you're setting the bond yield curve by artificially buying all of these bonds. So that metric means absolutely nothing.
Well, it means quite a lot. It means quite a lot, because if they took, as you would put it, their thumb off the scale, those inflation expectations would explode. You know, the market and the news and everybody's waking up to it now, and I've been writing about it for over a year. It's obvious. You print money, you get inflation. Now, QE in the past was misunderstood as being printing money, when in fact what it was pushing money into illiquid assets. But that's kind of boiled over now. And the mistake, although a lot of people disagree with me because they got the handout, one of the mistakes was handing out cash to people. Because one of the good things about making the rich richer and the poor poorer is it's deflationary. So if you like deflation, you want to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. Personally, I think that's not right. But if you make the poor richer and the rich poorer, you get inflation. That's just the way it is. So really, you know, maybe if you want lower rates of inflation, you should just make the poor a little bit richer and leave the rich alone. But hey, you know, we're talking about politics here, not common sense. And the situation we've got at the moment was a lot of money was squirted directly in to the non-well-off. Now, they've got, you see, you give money to the rich, they've got nothing to spend it on. They spent everything they need to spend it on, and they just stash the cash because they've got nowhere to put it. They don't reverse repo it like the banks, but, you know, they just stash it. And, of course, it goes into banks, and the banks lend it out. So any way you cut it, if you increase the money supply, then you will get inflation. Now, one of the things that's happened over the last 10 years is that the velocity of money, the speed at which money gets transacted, has gone down and down and down and down and down. And there's two reasons for this. One is because it's being given to the rich who don't need it and probably don't even want it, who then stash it. And it kind of lurks in pools of liquidity in banks and places like that, and funds and da-da-da. It's not active money. It's not hot, fast, transacting money. So it has a low velocity. And the other thing is, it's really difficult to move your money these days. I mean, you know, one day soon they're going to be asking you to KYC for a haircut. Yeah. So the velocity of money has been going down because of QE and the way that the QE has been distributed. Well, now you've had quite a large amount of it going into hot hands, and you've got all this disruption coming into the supply chain, which is pushing prices. And the fact that a lot of people's tempo of life has changed, and they've saved a lot. And they're going, well, I've got 6 months savings here. I'm not going to go to work for 6 months. Or I used to drive a truck, and that was, really, 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 really hard work. And now I'm driving an Amazon delivery van, and they're kind to me. They don't treat me like dirt, like when I was a lorry driver. So I'm not going to drive a lorry anymore. I'm going to be an Uber driver. I'm going to be an Amazon driver. Less money, but at least I sleep in my own bed. And that disjuncture, that reboot that we're experiencing, some people say it's a reset, but it's not, because we're not going back. The whole system is going through a reboot. And then the other thing, many people say, how do half these companies survive the COVID lockdown? Well, they've been destocking. So they've been turning their stock into cash. Well, now they don't have stock, and they can't get it. Or it's going to take a long time to build up that stock. They've destocked, and then they've scraped the bottom of the barrel, and now they're right out. And the lorry drivers are driving Ubers or delivering for Amazon and saying, don't want to drive a truck again and be put through the mincer by these blooming transport companies that make my life hell. And no one to drive lorries anymore. So that disruption, plus all this new money, plus the fact that people are not necessarily going back into the workforce, is all making a huge disruption. But the inflation is baked in. The inflation is baked in for 4 to 5 years at least this rate. And I was reading something today which apparently says that if they go for this carbon neutral thing, they're going to have to create quite a lot of more QE to afford the so-called investment in all this new technology and infrastructure. And that's going to cause 2 or 3% additional inflation on top of whatever we've got already, which is quite interesting. And I wonder, when they say investment, whether they actually mean the money that's got to be spent, i.e. spent, gone forever, on this net neutral carbon environment that's going to come in the next 30 years. That is 3% more, 2 or 3% more inflation on top of the 5 or 6% we're going to be getting for the next 5 years anyway. So you're going to be up there 8, 9, 10%. But if the American government has 8 or 9 or 10% inflation, the nominal GDP is going to go up 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, plus any growth, 1 or 2%. That's 12%. So GDP expands. Oh, we're going to carry on taxing you at the same rate, but you're earning more now. Well, you're not, but it looks like it on paper. So we're going to tax you more. So tax rates go up, or rather tax take goes up. The value of the deficit goes down. The value of the national debt goes down. So, government's got every reason to create inflation for the next 5 years. They've saved all those lives of the elderly, and we're going to pay for that. And I'm sure most of us are happy to pay 10 to 15% of our wealth to have our grandparents live another 3 or 4 years. I mean, not many people are so cold that they'd lose their senior citizens or their senior loved ones for 10 or 15% of their actual wealth. Well, that's happened. Now we've got to pay for it, and that's going to come through inflation, because it's not going to come through high taxes and austerity now, is it?
Hey, thanks for watching. And as always, if you hadn't already, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Best thing you can do to help the channel grow. And I'll see you again soon.